Okay, so in the previous tutorial we have seen how we can manipulate our character based on the AI logics. So currently if I simulate the game, it will be like this. So our character will be spawned and he'll start to move on the map, but the moving is still purely random, right? But actually what we need to do is move a worker character towards to a resource instance. Um, before achieving that functionality, first we have to get a nearby resource for a specific resource building, right? For example, let's say for a miner, right? A miner will be spawned through this mine, so he should move towards to the closest mining resource, such as these sort of stones, right? So that's the logic. So in order to move, first we have to check for the nearby resources and to determine what is the closest resource for that specific worker, right? Okay, so that's the core idea, and I think we already have that nearby resource population set up. So if you go to the BP resource building base, here we had created a function for populate the nearby resources. So this is really helpful for us to determining what is the closest resource for a specific worker. So first I will close this unnecessary windows. Okay, and maybe we can start with maybe a lumber, right? So I'll disable this barn instance as well as the mine instance, and if I focus to this specific lumber hut, you can see we have 4 nearby resources and the one worker instance has been instantiated. Okay, so first we have to go for the characters and worker base, and here we have to create a function for searching nearby resources, right? So let me bring this thing like that. So I don't need these two stuffs, but I need the begin play, and the parent begin play should be instantiated as well. And maybe I'll wait some random delay, maybe not, it doesn't need to be random delay, maybe 0.2 seconds, and I'll search for resources, right? So maybe I will create a new event called search for resource, right? And yeah, so I'll create another function for finding resource because this will require some amount of work. Okay, so first I'll get our home resource building. So how can I get the home resource building? Yeah, maybe I think we have to first instantiate our work class with the specific home building base or home resource building reference. So I'll create a variable called home resource building, and this should be in the resource building base type. And I'll create another function for initialize worker, Okay, this as the very first function that we instantiate, and as an input I will take home resource build. Okay, and here actually we spawn our workers, right? So let me first check my documentation. So most probably actually we have to create a function within our resource building base, and yeah, exactly. So here on the BP resource building base, when we are spawning our worker, we are adding that worker to the spawned workers map, and after that by using this spawned worker instance we can initialize this worker, and this is a resource building base type, so with respect to specific child class we'll pass a self reference. Then this worker is aware of what's the resource building that he is responsible of, right? And that's how we can initialize our work, right? So for example, for demonstration purposes, maybe I can print this thing, so I'll use a different color, otherwise it will be difficult to distinguish the resource types and the resource base. So if I simulate it now, and you can see the BP lumber hut will be printed as red, which means that the worker instance is now aware of what's the home resource building is. Great. And then we can go to this find resource function, and if our home resource building is valid, then we can get the nearby resource list, right? Because this has been already populated within the resource building class, and we can go for each item, traverse through each item by using the for each loop, and then we have to check whether we can acquire this resource or not, right? So based on the specific resource building type, there can be several conditions, maybe custom conditions that I need to be able to define. So therefore I'll create a function within the resource building base class. So you will be later on even able to specify the custom functionalities as well. So let's create a function called can resource be acquired by work, right? And this is a pure function, and I'll simply return a boolean value called return value, and this simply specify the acquirability of a specific resource building. And for the simplicity I will make this as true always, right? And later on we will see how we can define the custom rules, but for now let's keep it as true always. And then we can call that function can resource be acquired by worker. Sorry, actually this function should go in the natural resource base class, right? So resources, natural resources base, over here I can have that function, because we are iterating through a natural resource list, right? So let's call that function can resource be acquired by a worker. If it can be acquired by a worker, then we can populate maybe a list of acquirable resources. So I'll name it as acquirable resource list, and this should be in the type of natural resource base, and it should be a list. So I'll add the unique element to this array if it can be acquirable. Okay. So I think maybe it's better if we can make it as a local variable, because this function may be called by several workers. So better if it is a local variable. Yeah. So I can't create a local variable like that. So let me quickly create it like this. Resources list, and I'll delete this one, and maybe let's refresh the nodes and compile. Okay, so likewise we have to populate the acquirable resource list, and so I'll comment this as maybe find all acquirable resources, and so I will use this black color. Okay, then after this iteration we have to get what's the closest acquirable resource for this specific work. So let's get a self reference and get the actor location, and let's get the acquirable resource list. So Unreal Engine actually provide a built-in function called find nearest actor, which automatically return the nearest actor for a specific object instance. So if this returns a valid instance, which means that we have found a valid actor, right? So we have to cast it to the natural resource base, because this is returning a generic actor class. So we have to get the corresponding natural resource class based on that, and we can return a resource like this. And if it is casting is invalid, or if we haven't found a valid object, then we simply return a null reference, right? So I'll comment this as find nearest resource. Okay, great. Okay, great. Then we can actually use this within the search for resource function or event RSOURC. Okay, yeah. So I'll make this as maybe a pure function, and if this returns a valid instance, then we can go towards the current target resource, right? So maybe I'll promote a variable called current target resource, and yeah, that's it. And also if we already have a current target resource, a valid target resource, then We don't need to actually find for a new resource, right? Because later on actually we will implement features for resource depletion as well, so eventually those resources will get destroyed. But however, if a specific instance is already exists, then a worker should move to that specific worker always, specific natural resource towards always, right? So therefore actually we can maybe guard this for loop by saying, if this current target resource is already valid instance, then we don't need to find for a new resource. Instead, we can simply return this existing current target resource as the target resource that worker should move on, right? Okay, so then we can call that event over here, and maybe for the testing purposes I will print this thing. So I will use maybe red color, and if I simulate it now, okay, you can see that bp3 instance has been found as the nearest resource for that specific lump. So likewise, if I enable this barn and mine, we will see some of the fruit instance as well as a stone instance plus a tree instance as the nearest resource for each worker type, right? So if I simulate it now, okay, you can see stone, tree and fruit plant has been found as the nearest resources. Great. So actually that's how we can find out what's the nearest resource for a specific worker by sensing the ranges of these resource buildings, right? So maybe I will show in the next video how we can move our character towards to that specific resource. Plus maybe we can collapse this node as search for resources, right? So it's a bit more clear. And yeah, so in the next video maybe we'll see how we can move our worker instance towards that specific nearest natural resource. And thank you. I'll see you in the next video.